Hello, good evening. How are y'all doing? Hello to the folks who got here before I did, because I logged in and saw that there were comments already. So thank you for joining me tonight. I have a fan on. Hopefully that is not messing with the sound. If it is, let me know, and I'll turn it off and suffer in silence. Perimenopause. It's not even hot here, but I am hot thanks to my buddy Perry. How y'all doing? It is Tuesday, and here I am live on a Tuesday. Look at me getting my stuff together. I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that. Um, there's not a whole lot going on right now, so I wish I could update y'all with something really fun. Oh, I can update y'all. Last week, we talked about my trip to Brazil and should I go out to Iguazu Falls or not. Um, the more and more I looked at that, the less excited about it I was. So that is off the table. I was strongly considering taking taking a trip to the capital of Brazil. Are y'all saying that the sound is messing up? I hate to hear that because I really want to keep the fan on. Um, so yeah, I'm leaning more towards going to the capital of Brazil, Brasilia, and I know that's not a place where a lot of people go, but the geography nerd in me is particularly interested because Brasilia is what you would call a a forward capital, like a place like Mexico City, Lima, um, hell, who else? Those are modern capitals that were colonial capitals. They, even before they were colonial capitals, they were like the centers of trade and that sort of thing. Brasilia, that is not the case. Rio de Janeiro used to be the capital of Brazil, but in the mid early 20th century, the government decided they wanted people to move away from the coast and try and populate the interior. So they built Brasilia further inland in the country and wanted people to go out there and populate it. So it's like instead of a place just kind of developing on its own, they planned it. They had this particular architect who sort of designed all of the major buildings and the layout. And so the geography nerd in me, that's like a far more interesting way to spend my time. So if I add anything on to the Brazil trip, that is probably what I'm going to do. I've identified that I am probably going to add 2 extra days in uh, Sao Paulo so that I can visit. I want to visit the Afro Brazilian Museum there, and they have a Japanese immigration museum that looks interesting. I'm going to check that out. And I think I found a tour guide who does Afro Brazilian tours in Sao Paulo, which is not known for that. So yeah, I can update that on y'all. I can update y'all on that. I am not going to be going to Iguazu Falls when I go to Brazil in November, assuming my visa gets approved. I applied for my visa and they kicked it back to me because the picture I uploaded showed my shoulders, and they told me that that was not an appropriate photo to submit for a visa application. So I had to take another picture. I uploaded that. So we will see, hopefully, in the next day or so, if they give me a visa. If they don't, oh, I don't know. I don't know. Okay. So that's the update we got going right now. Okay. So let's get to why most of y'all are probably here. We're going to be talking about money tonight, and particularly we're going to be talking about move abroad money. Um, I left the United States 9 years ago. And from the time I have left up until now, one thing has stayed constant is that when people talk to me about, like, oh, I'd love to move abroad, I'd love to leave the US, um, their number one concern is, like, I'd move abroad, but I got to figure out the money piece. I don't know what I would do to earn money. That over the last 9 years, that has remained a top concern for people. And for some of you who are here live tonight, and possibly some of you that are watching the replay, that is probably a concern of yours as well. Um, Given the ways in which the US has become more hostile to us, and I don't anticipate that stemming off. I actually believe it is going to be more hostile to folks that look like us. Um, I get why you might be considering leaving the US. And, I want to help you figure out some of that money piece and share, what I have learned and figured out over the last 9 years. Um, I'm trying to do this with my left hand, and it is not working well, so sorry about that. So, just in case you are new here, welcome to my channel. I am Adelia Aborishade, aka Picky Girl Travels the World. I am a financial educator, I'm a coach, and I like to share um, the things that I have learned that I know, and that includes all that money stuff you wish you were taught when you were growing up, the ins and outs of traveling solo as a Black woman, as well as, how to make a life abroad in another country. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, you absolutely should subscribe to the channel. That is honestly the only way to make sure in this world of algorithms and whatnot that YouTube brings my content to your feed. So I'll give you a moment to go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you are not subscribed, and then we will get into it. All right, y'all. And if you've got any questions, drop those in the chat. Y'all know I do love to answer a question. So if you've got one of those, drop it in the chat. Okay. Oh, one other thing before we get started. Um, because I decided I always forget like announcements to make at the end of the stream. I never remember. So I made myself a note to remind y'all about the announcements at the beginning of the stream. And that is if you are not currently on the email list, or if you're not sure whether or not you are on the email list, go ahead and sign up, because I am getting ready to release a couple of things. And let's be real with the way the various social media platforms. I'm primarily on YouTube and I am on Instagram. But the way things are going, if we want to stay connected, the best way to do that is through email. So, I'm not saying anything is going to happen to these particular platforms, but being connected on email is a much more reliable way. So if you're not on the email list, go ahead and do that. There is a link in the description that you can use as well. Okay. All right. So we're talking about move abroad money. Um, and I have made several videos, and some of them are linked in the description that hits on some of these things. So I'll be sharing those for you to follow up with as well. Probably, as I said, um, you know, the money piece of leaving your home country, I don't necessarily believe it is the most complicated, but I will say that it is the one probably that stresses people out the most. And they see it as the biggest hurdle for them. And, everybody's situation is different. For some people, it is a bigger hurdle than others. But I think there is a lot of, what would the word be? A lot of misconceptions and ideas about the money piece of moving to another country that, I don't know that we've all got it right. Okay. So, um, one of the things that I hear a lot, and I would love to dispel this because I think it's a myth. I really do think it's a myth, is this idea that if I'm going to another country, I'm mostly talking to you US Americans because that is who I hear this from the most, that if I am going to another country, um, I need to still earn what I am earning in the US. And I don't think that is true. I have lived in 4 different countries outside of the US, and I have never earned, what I earned in the US, and let's be real, I was in public education. I wasn't earning all that much to begin with, okay? Um, and I know some folks are thinking, "Well, like, yeah, you probably don't need as much money as you would in the States because the cost of living is cheaper, it's lower." While that is true, that's not really the m that's not the only reason why you don't need to replace all of the income that you are making currently in the US. I have done cost of living breakdowns for my life here in Mexico. I've I think I've done at least 4 or 5 of them. I did one in 2025. And yes, it does cost me less than it would in the US, but a lot of that is because the US is just ridiculously expensive. And those of you who live in the US, I think y'all will agree with me there. I can remember probably about 5 years ago, I had been gone at that point for 4 years, and I was probably there to get a COVID shot or something, I don't remember. But I remember going to stores and just being aghast at what the prices were, and thinking to myself, how are these prices this much higher than when I left 4 years before? And how are people being able to afford this? Because I didn't see wages going up, and that's, I think, part of the reason why, consumer debt is as high as it is in the US because wages have not gone up, and so people, to adjust to those higher prices and the higher cost of living, are carrying a whole lot more debt on credit cards and things like that. But yes, the US is super expensive. Are there places more expensive than the US? Yes. For instance, if you were considering a move abroad to Switzerland, Norway, Sweden, uh, Singapore, all of those places, to live the life that you want is probably going to cost you more than it does already. But those are not easy places to get residency visas. But for the vast majority of people leaving the US, their cost of living will probably go down. And, you know, um, and I mentioned before, for me, I lived in these different countries. And when I was working, like I worked in Honduras, and I told y'all I took a 60% pay cut when I moved to Honduras. When I lived in China, when I lived in Kuwait, and even when I taught business English in Mexico very briefly, but I was still living on less than I was in the US. And for China and Kuwait and for Honduras, because my employer, because I was brought there to perform my job, um, they covered my housing. So even though I made less money, like the benefits I got with those gigs, I made less money. I didn't have to pay any federal income taxes. I did not have to, at least in Kuwait and in Honduras, I did not have to pay local income taxes. The Chinese government, however, did get their money. And so I got to keep more of my money in my pocket. And I had benefits from my employer. So therefore, I needed less money to live on. I could actually live on that itty bitty money I was making in Honduras. But I'm saying all of this to say that get rid of that idea that you have to, whatever you're making now, as you are looking, because there are many ways to afford a move abroad. Okay. But for the folks who are looking at taking jobs abroad, or they're considering, remote roles or what have you, but the pay is lower than what you're used to. I don't want you to stop right there and say, I can't make this work. I'm not even making what I'm making. I wouldn't be making what I'm making now, because you've got to look at the bigger picture. What, how much would it actually cost to live the life you want? Um, you know, in all four countries that I have lived in, I have lived without a car. So I haven't, when you factor in my cost of living, I have not had to pay for a car note, insurance, any of those kinds of things. You know, for, I would say, a significant number of folks who leave the US and go somewhere else, the way in which they choose to live their life is often a lot more simplified, and they have fewer overhead costs than what they do stateside. Okay. So I want us to let go of that idea that because I'm not going to be earning the same, then I can't go, because you don't need the same amount of money. I think the last time I did a cost of living of my Mexican expenses, rent, health insurance, all of that, I'm still, depending depending how lazy I am about food, I think I'm still living on about somewhere between $1,000 to $1,200 uh, a month for my expenses. Now, that's my Mexican expenses. I did not include what I spend on fabric, and I did not include my travel. And there are, I've indulged, let's just say, I've indulged a bit more in those things than I normally would, because I turned 50 this year, and every day is an opportunity to gift myself something. So, but no, you don't need to earn as much as you did stateside, because life is probably going to cost you less. Okay. So that's one thing we don't have to worry about, particularly because I know a big concern for some folks is like the cost of health insurance and the cost of medical care. I don't know that there is any place in the world where medical care is as expensive as it is in the US. I don't know that there is. So you're going to spend less. Okay. Um, Another thing I think that gets in people's way when they are considering moving abroad and they're trying to figure out the money is this idea that I have to have a job or a single business, or I've got to do this one thing, and that has, you know, got to provide everything for me. I had a client call the other day, and we were discussing like what skills did they have? What were things that they wouldn't mind doing for money? And now that I've said that out loud, that sounds inappropriate. And I didn't mean it that way. I meant it more in the way of, we all have skills. There are all things that we can do, but we don't want to monetize them all. Like, I don't care to monetize, um, my sewing. I don't I don't really care to monetize my travel. I wanna share what I wanna share, but I don't want it to be a job. That's what I meant. Like, I have the skill set to teach, high school students. I don't wanna do that. I can do it, but I don't want to. So, we were discussing, like, what skills did they have? What were things they would be willing to do for money in that sense? Um, and what I often hear from people is like, well, these are the things I did in the past. And it is like, I have to find a single thing that does that. And I want us to be open to the idea that it is less about like a single source of income, a job or what have you. Because actually, this idea that like I have to find this one thing to make the money I need to live abroad, um, I think it is unnecessarily limiting because if you are married to the idea that I need to do one thing, then there's a lot of pressure on that one thing to provide all of the money you need. And maybe given how you want to spend your time, like you don't want to work 10-hour days. You don't want to have to work every day of the week. There are ways that you can have multiple streams of income, and maybe they're not giant numbers, but there are 3 things, 4 things, I don't know, that you don't mind doing for money, and they each pay a little, but when you put them together, it's more than enough. Um, I interviewed, and her name is not at the top of my mind right now. I just saw her name on my phone. Uh, she she was on She lives in Costa Rica with her husband and her daughter and her young son, who was actually born in Costa Rica. She'd had cancer, didn't think she could ever have kids, but left the US, moved to Costa Rica. Why can't I remember her name? And, one of the things we talked about in that interview was, like, what does she do for money? And both she and her husband made significantly less than they did in the US. Um, and she did like 3, 4, maybe 5 different things. And so I want us to be more open to that idea. And I think for a lot of us, and I bet somebody watching right now, it's kind of been a unconscious bias that you've had about making money. This idea that I need a job or I start a business or I do one single thing. Like it's been drilled into us because of the American capitalist work culture that that's what you do. And the idea of having multiple things that you do, be they gigs, whatever, it's kind of like that one that's less than, or two that like, that's not what successful people do, all of that. Um, I want us to open our minds. I want us to be less rigid about that. Um, and let's not forget the lessons we learned from the pandemic. Remember back in 2020 when folks who had a single stream of income lost that stream of income. And then there were great concerns about like, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to feed myself? That sort of thing. Like we've got a little distant from then, but I don't want us to forget the lessons. And that's one of the lessons that I took to heart was that you don't want a single source of income. The world is too uncertain. And for those of you in the United States, and if you're Black in the United States, if you are a Black woman in the United States, it is particularly uncertain for you. So, Yeah, I want us to open our minds and think about that in a new way. Okay. And again, if you've got questions, drop those. We're going to get them answered. Um, Courtney says your single job is tied to your social standing here. Job is identity. Letting that go has been liberating for you and me both. Um, I still stumble. I have been retired for 5 years. Yeah, 5 years because I retired at the end of June 2020. And I don't think about work in the same way. Um, and like, I am not my work. Work is something I choose to do when I do it, and it's got to be something I feel like doing. And so, when you're having conversations, you're making small talk, and somebody's trying to get to know a little bit more about me, and they will ask, like when we were in Scotland at the retreat, uh, we were already an oddity. We were the only Black people there. And we were Americans who did not live in the US. And so they were like, "Oh, and what do you do?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Like, I don't even think about it. Like, I'm so divorced from that idea that I am my job and my job is me. So it is very liberating. I agree completely. Okay. So that I want us to rethink that. Now, when you talk about moving abroad or people, I've seen this in so many of the Facebook groups I'm in. um, I've noticed these conversations a little bit more on threads and on Instagram. People are like, okay, I want to move abroad and I need a remote job. Okay, number one, no, you don't need a remote job. A remote job is one option. And really, you want to be more specific for that. You want a job that allows you to work from anywhere, because it, a remote job and work from anywhere are not the same thing. Um, a remote job, and I am not trying to poo-poo on that, okay? It seems like the obvious solution, but I want us to make sure we don't have tunnel vision and think that's the only way. That if what I do can't I don't see obvious connections between remote jobs and what I do, then I can't move abroad. That is not true. That is not true. Yeah, you want to be location independent. And so if you are looking to work for an employer, because that is just one option. If you're looking to work for an employer, a remote job um, looks like the obvious answer. You get to earn money in USD and spend it. I don't know how true this is anymore. You get, at least previously, you would earn your salary in USD, euros, something considered to be a stronger currency. And depending where you live, the dollar or the euro might go really far. Um, since January, the dollar has not been so strong. So, that's something to think about. I am not trying to alarm anybody, but that's the reality of living outside of your home country and earning money not in the local currency. Uh, that's something to think about. So, yes, a remote job could be a solution, particularly because you don't necessarily have to try and get a work visa. And when I say a work visa, in this is permission to work in another country because you have a job in that country. So, for instance, when I moved to Honduras, I had a work visa. I and it was because it was a position that could not be filled by a local person. Same thing when I worked in Kuwait, same thing when I worked in China. Even when I taught business English here in Mexico, the language school that hired me had to prove to the government that I was uniquely qualified to do that and that they couldn't get a local candidate. So, as you can imagine, and particularly with what you've been hearing, those of you in the US, in the news about like H-1B visas and all of that, work visas can be difficult to get depending on the kind of work you do. So a remote job would remove that hurdle for you. Okay. But again, I don't want us to get into very like binary, black and white kind of thinking. I want us to kind of keep our minds open to different possibilities and maybe unusual solutions. Um, Everybody is not a good candidate for remote work. And so that's something you need to kind of talk to yourself about. Working remotely, there are some people, believe it or not, who absolutely hate it or just aren't well suited for that. Like being alone at home doing their job is not enjoyable for them. So that's something you need to decide, does that work for you? Um, or not. I will say, for those of you who are considering remote work, you're going to need to expand your your reach, your consideration, your search outside of US companies because we've seen like the writing has been on the wall for a while in the US. They want people back in the office, not necessarily because they have to be there to get the job done, but more because they've paid for commercial real estate or they want to be able to micromanage you. So if you are looking and considering remote work, think about global companies. Think about startups. They rarely need everybody to be in the same place. Um, Look for companies that are already like in multiple places and do those kinds of things. As always, y'all know, um, if you've been on this channel for a while, you know that quitcommuting.com, set up by Libria Jones, uh, has tons of resources for that. Um, Also, resource for that is going to be Exodus Summit, which is it 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I don't, I I've kind of forgotten how to read a calendar, but Exodus Summit is going to have speakers talking about things that help you. If that is actually most of what we're talking about tonight, there are going to be some speakers at Exodus Summit um, helping you get your move abroad money right. I'll even be speaking at Exodus Summit, but I am going to be talking to you about making money. Actually, somebody had a question. Here it is. Uh, Using dividends as passive income. That is one of the things I'm going to talk about in my session. Because I ain't trying to work. So if there's a way to make money and I don't have to work, that's what I'm talking about. If you haven't gotten your tickets for Exodus Summit and you want to help a girl out, maybe because you heard about the summit on this channel, I do have an affiliate link. It is in the description. Uh, is it anywhere else? No, I was looking through my notes on here. It isn't. Hold on. Let me find it. What is it? I think it is. Here it goes. Look at me. I'm so proud of myself. I did have it somewhere. Okay. Um, Now on the wrong screen. Okay. So, uh, Exodus Summit is going to be October 13th through, no, that is wrong. October 10th through the 13th. Thank you, Flutterby. You. It is going to be Indigenous Peoples Weekend. If you are a Black woman and you want to move abroad, and you are, particularly every year, this is the sixth summit. They've been having these summits since 2020. If you are a Black woman and you want to know, what can I do to make money? This is the second time they have talked. The theme of the summit has been about making money. The last time they did this, I believe, was 2022, maybe 2023. And then there were like 20 different sessions on things you could do to make money. I expect it to be even better. I will tell you, and there's several people here in the chat who have been to Exodus Summit every year. Rashida Dow and Stephanie Perry outdo themselves. Like, last year's summit was so good. I was like, how did y'all outdo the year before? And I am completely confident that they will outdo themselves again this year. If you want to know how to make money, you need to be there, plain and simple. So, um, they will, all of the things we're talking about tonight and then some. Okay. But I wanted to have this conversation to kind of maybe prep you or open you up to the idea or get you thinking in new ways. Okay, so let's talk about passive income. Um, there are a couple of ways to do that. And I really hate to call it passive income because I think I just remembered I did a video on passive income, just ways that you could make quote unquote passive income. Um, I'll have to find the link to that and put it in the description. Uh, I will tell you, most of the stuff people about on the internet are not truly passive. Like I said, I don't want to do anything. I want to be chill. I want to watch my Netflix. I want to go to museums, take salsa classes, go to cafes, and so I don't want to work. Okay. And I know that seems very anti-American, but I don't want to work. So particularly in my session, we're going to be looking at specific ways that you can make money without having to do much. But who was it that mentioned? Was it you, Anita, that talked about? Oh, okay, no. FDM. Renting out my townhouse will cover a significant chunk of my monthly budget. I'm considering coaching if I need more income. Okay, one thing about us collectively as a people, uh, we a lot of us tried the American dream, and a big part of that is buying a home. And I know when people are thinking about leaving, it's kind of like, well, what do I do with my house? I just remember I did a video on that. Should you buy your house? Should you sell your house when you move abroad, or should you like use it as a way to generate income? Everybody is different. Talked to several ladies. They all had a different reason for why they chose what they chose. But if you have been spending, a big chunk of your life working toward the American dream and you've got this real estate, don't ignore that it could be a way to give you money with you doing as little as possible. Um, I have been a landlord. I did not enjoy it at all. So not that is not something I have chosen to do to have money in this life. But Anita, the global granny, she was in my video I did about that. Um, and several other ladies talked about why they did or didn't and what that meant. So, if you've got real estate, whatever it is, and it is something that you can earn rent from, don't ignore that as a possibility. Okay, this is a good question. Are dividends really passive income if they're being reinvested? Well, okay, let's talk about this because I am going to talk about this in my session. A dividend, if you know that a dividend is money a particular stock or a particular fund pays out to the people who own it periodically. That could be twice a year, once a quarter, something like that. Okay. Now, I told y'all, I ain't trying to work. One of the reasons I am not a landlord, and it is for me, the stock market has been a much easier route to have money. So, Chanel's question is, are dividends really passive income? Because dividends are, I would say, probably the only true passive income, or it to me is the most passive, because literally you've bought this thing, and it doesn't have to be a stock. You could have shares in a company and they pay you out periodically from their profits. Okay. But you've bought this thing and you're not doing anything with it. You're not trading, you're not buying, selling, you're just holding it. And every so often they pay you money. You've done nothing. That is passive income. Now, her question, is it passive if they're being reinvested? Well, generally speaking, at least like if you're talking about past dividends paid off of stocks and funds, if you're not at a point where you are planning to withdraw the money and use it, you the prevailing wisdom is that you might as well have it reinvested, buy more of that investment so that you can get paid more. And the reinvesting isn't, it's still income. They have still paid it to you. It is still income that you didn't do anything for. Now, the reinvesting is not work, because that's an automated thing. That is literally you go into your brokerage account and you check a box. And anytime, let's say, for instance, you owned stock in McDonald's and McDonald's paid out their dividend, without having to do anything, your brokerage account already knows whenever that McDonald's money hits, use it to buy however much more McDonald's. So I think I consider it still passive income, because you've still earned the income. You've not done anything to earn it. Now, if you have reinvesting turned on, um, you can't really use it because you've already spent it buying more shares. But if you are at a place in your life where you want to be able to live on money, you turn off reinvesting and you have that money just deposited in the account and you pull it out when you want. Okay. Ba, 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 ba. Is passive income possible if you have debt and not as much cash? Uh, do saving goals come first, or can a person reduce debt while generating income? Okay. Um, there are a lot of schools of thought on this. I am of the school of thought that you can do both, but I think we have to look at your potential, your personal situation to see what makes sense for you. If the debt you have is high interest debt, paying that off earns you more immediately than what you're trying to get out in dividends. Okay. If you've got credit cards that are charging you 23, 24%, there's no investment that is not something that's not uber risky. There's no investment that's going to pay you 23%. So if you think about paying down that debt, every time you pay that credit card, whatever 23% that you would be paying in interest on your total balance, you're actually putting that money back in your pocket because you are eliminating that debt. So, if the debt you have is high interest, I would focus my attention there. But if we're talking about saving for being work optional, retirement, I would not ignore, let's say you work someplace and there's a 401k and they offer an employer match. I would I would do what I need to do so I could get that free money from my employer. But whatever that's being invested, it's not going to give you the immediate return ROI that paying down that high interest debt. Okay. And to me, that's really not about generating passive income, but more about shoring up yourself financially, because it's like the volume of money going out toward high interest debt versus what will be coming in from passive income, there's no comparison. Um, I see high interest debt as very much a drain on your finances. But even if you have debt, that doesn't mean you can't invest. But I would be strategic about how I do it. And I would be looking at like getting that employer match if you qualify for an HSA, health savings account, because you have a high deductible insurance plan. I would take advantage of that because that money is triple tax advantaged. So to me, it's not an either or, but it's more about you got to be strategic about your specific situation. Okay. I heard that renting your home is not considered passive because of all the work that comes with it. Um, well, it depends. As far as the IRS is concerned, that is passive income. Now, you can do it in such a way, and Anita talks about this in the conversation we had in the video that I have on my channel about how she does it, where she's not hands on. She is paying for property management, she's paying for people to handle things. So, in that way, it can't being a landlord can be more passive. Uh, so it can be more passive. But if you're talking about like for tax purposes, the IRS considers it to be passive. Uh, okay. All righty. Okay. So we talked about you don't need to be looking for a single way to find the money you need to fund your life abroad. We talked about that you don't need to make as much money as you are currently. Um, oh, before we move on, just one little side note. Often I get asked, well, should I move abroad if I have debt? That's going to be a personal choice. But if you do move abroad with debt, that making those debt payments is going to increase your cost of living and therefore increase the amount of income you might need to generate. So that is something that has to be factored in when you are planning and figuring out, because maybe you've got a very what's the right word? The position that you have, the title that you have is, one that comes with a hefty paycheck. And to still live the life you want, you could take a less a less demanding, a less like prestigious job in another country. But if you've got debt that you will be having to service while you are abroad, you may not have that freedom. So I think high interest debt is a drain on your finances, but it also, if you choose to move abroad with that debt, it is going to limit your options and your flexibility when it comes to how you make money. Okay. Um, So moving forward, we were talking about remote jobs, that we want to expand the kinds of companies we are thinking about. Really look for global companies, look for like non-traditional companies, a company that has a workforce all over the place. And here's the other thing, for those people who are looking for remote job, don't take the title of what you do now and plug that in and say, and just to look for remote roles. Don't do that, because it's not about the title you have. It is about the skill set you have. What are the things you can do? I would search for positions in that way. And I think that might open up a much wider range of possibilities of the kind of thing that you can do, uh, that you might not have considered before. Because it's very easy to have blinders on, and like your job title is, customer service director. And so that's the positions you look for. But really, you've got skills to do a whole bunch of stuff. And it may be things you don't mind doing for money. We talked about passive income. Now, there are some people who don't necessarily need to generate income, because they already have it. They've got either savings through, let's say, you're at an age where you can tap your 401k money without penalty, your IRA money without penalty. Or you've got money in brokerage accounts, that sort of thing. Passive income can be stock dividends. It could be other investments like real estate, or you have invested, you went in with 6 other people and y'all bought I was going to say Chick-fil-A, and then I was like, no, I don't want to say them. A Wendy's. Y'all bought a Wendy's, and, you just wait for your check from Wendy's to be cut every month. So there is that. There are different ways. Now, in the video that I did on passive income, it wasn't all things that would work outside of the US. Because some of the suggestions we had and this might work for the folks who are trying to build up a fund that they can then use abroad. But it was like, like if you've got a backyard, you can rent out your backyard, for like people who live in apartments that need a place to run around with their dog. If you've got tools, you've got drills and sanders and stuff like that, there are apps that would allow you to lend those to people for money who don't want to buy them because they're working on like a single project or something like that, you know. Um, so passive income could be an option. And then the last one that I have on my list is thinking that you need to find, oh, this is not the last one on my list. I'm sorry, I spoke wrong. Thinking that you need to find a job in the new country. We talked about a little earlier that getting a work visa can be tricky. I was able to do it because there is a demand for US certified teachers at international schools around the world. Um, and so I was able to do that fairly easily. If you are in healthcare, um, I know somebody who moved to Qatar, who worked in healthcare, because while Qatar, the official language is Arabic, in most Middle Eastern countries, English is the language of business. English is widely spoken because so many of the people who work there are foreigners coming from a bunch of different places. People speak English, it's the lingua franca. Um, so because they worked in healthcare, I believe they applied for the job on Monday, got the interview. got the job on Wednesday and was on a plane to Qatar by the next Monday. So, yes, just like there's this whole conversation in the US about, keeping jobs for local people and making it more difficult for foreigners to get jobs, that's fairly universal, except if you have the skills that they have a critical shortage for. And I'm trying to think, what video did I do on that? I did several, and they are in the description of this video, about countries that are really good for people who are looking for jobs. And those would be countries that have critical shortages: Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, Germany, Austria, one of those Baltic countries. I can't remember if it's Latvia. It might be Latvia or it might be Lithuania. So it is possible. I don't want anybody thinking like, oh no, none of these other things fit me. I need a job in another country. It is possible to get a job in another country. Often the best way to do that is to fill a critical need. Healthcare is one. I keep seeing, like, if any of y'all are considering moving to Canada and if you work in healthcare, they are like, please come here. We will speed up the process for you. There are several European countries that have critical shortages. What it's going to do, what it's going to take is you're going to have to do a bit of digging, a bit of research, and um, what was I going to say? Because Courtney posted this, and yes, um, the blue card Germany. When I found out about the blue card, I was like, "This is wild. This is hard to believe." In Germany, they're like, "You've got these skills. Come over here. We'll give you this blue card. You can use that to work here or in some other European country." Like, there now, it does. I'm not going to say this is the easiest route to go, but I think if you have skills, particularly STEM, so like me, I got a degree in history. They're not they don't want me. But those of you, you science girlies, you technology girlies, you math girlies, you engineering girlies, they want y'all. So, what it's going to take is doing a little digging. And what is the name of the video? I think the video is called Get a Job Abroad. There is a link in the description where I go through, it's a couple of years old, but the basic information still applies. Countries that have critical shortages and how to find them. Okay. Um, the other thing that I would say about getting a job in another country is, again, the whole point of tonight's conversation in this video is to get out of our rigid way of looking at this. If you have your heart set on moving to Spain, I do not believe Spain has any critical shortages. I don't think they have that program. But let's say you have your heart set on moving to Spain and they don't have that program and you're distraught. Think of your move abroad as maybe a multi-step process. Maybe there is a starter country that you go to because you can get a job there. And then once you've established yourself, you are in a better position to then move to the country you really, really have your heart set on. Like, I myself, I wanted to leave the United States. I got a job in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, which that year was, I think, number 2 on the list of murder capitals. Another city in Honduras, San Pedro Sula, I believe, had number 1. So not a place, it just really wasn't a place that I thought was going to be a good fit for me. long term. It was not. But I took the job because it got me out of the US. It got me experience working internationally that I then leveraged into the subsequent positions that I was able to get. So don't get so caught up in, okay, I'm leaving the US and I'm moving to my dream country. There may be some countries in between that you just like, that you don't love, and that's okay. That's okay. It's just another step toward your goal. Okay. Um, okay. So getting a job in another country, or okay, starting your own business. That can look a bunch of different ways. Okay. Some people get very locked in, sort of like, okay, I got to find a remote job. I got to have an online business. Maybe, maybe not. I interviewed Corinne on this channel. She is an esthetician and has a studio, a brick and mortar studio here in Mexico City. And when part of her move abroad strategy was she knew that that is something that she wanted to do. And so as she was doing her research for her move, she got into community and got connected with people who had that knowledge so that she could do that once she got here. I think I interviewed my other friend, Teresa, who ran a catering business. She did not have a restaurant, but she did a catering business. So again, not an online business. So having a business, particularly if you are someone who has an entrepreneurial spirit, can be the way that you fund your life abroad. It might be starting, depending on what the business is. It could be that you are the business. If you are a freelancer, um, if you're somebody who is not a W-2 employee and you are used to getting clients for what you do, I don't have can't think of a lot of examples here, but I'm thinking like you do bookkeeping. Oh, I talked to Yolanda, who moved to Spain. And we talked about how she basically took what she did before and she became her own company, and she does freelance contracts. And that is how she funds her life abroad, because she is in her 50s. She is not old enough for Social Security or to tap into her retirement funds. So you could have an online business, something like what Yolanda does, something like what I do. Or you could, depending on the country, depending on your interests, the things you're willing to do for money and your skill set, you could open a brick and mortar business. Now, often, I think this is an often neglected path to getting a residency visa. And I have been saying I was going to do a video on this and I still haven't, is getting a business visa. Like there is the DAFT program between the Netherlands, that if you are a US American and you have your own business, that could be you're a bookkeeper that works online. It could be that you do hair. It could be that you do nails. That you have a business. It's like the Dutch American Friendship Treaty. I think that's what the T is for. Um, if you are a US American and you have a business or you want to start a business and you can make a bank deposit of, it used to be 4,000 euro, I'm not sure what it is now, and you supply them with like, this is my business idea, here's my plan, blah, 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 they would give you a residency visa that could, lead to a long-term path of being there. So if you're some person that the idea of working for somebody else is not very attractive to you, and passive income is not your jam either, you can have your own business abroad. I spoke to long time ago. I did a series of interviews with Black women about the places they thought were best to live abroad. And I spoke to a young lady in South Korea, and she was like, instead of going to Korea to like teach English, which is the route most US Americans go, she was like, I went in under a business visa. And they, part of the South Korean business visa she got a certain amount of time to like create she got like a year or something, to do the groundwork for setting up the business before it had to be there. So that's an option that a lot of people don't necessarily consider. Um, and it's going to look different. Who is on my list? Countries that are good for that. I know Japan has one, South Korea, the Netherlands. Um, I mean, Mexico has one, but I don't think the one here is super simple. But if there is a country that you are interested in, you might want to look at business visa. If there is something that you're doing as a side hustle now, that could be the business that gets you the visa you need to be somewhere else, that then can fund the life that you want in another country. Um, Something to consider. Okay. So those are all the things on my list, different ways that you can make money. In the description of this video, there are several, because I want us to get to thinking outside the box. I will say that's going to be the biggest thing that will aid you in sorting out the money piece, beyond like figuring out how much does the life I want cost in the place I want to be. Okay, there's that piece. But then when it comes to figuring out how am I going to pay for this, we've got to kind of let go of all the things we had before. There's a video that I've linked in the description. It's like 10 jobs that you can take abroad. So, for instance, Corinne, she went to school in the US. While she was working her regular HR job, she went to school and got her esthetician training. Okay. And so there are people who want, particularly Black women, who want to go to who live abroad and don't live in a country where there are a lot of Black folks, who would like to go to an esthetician who understands Black skin. There are other jobs like that you can take with you abroad that are going, think about the services. This could be part of your research as you are joining different communities, like Facebook groups in the cities and countries you're considering. And you hear people talking about like, oh, I wish I could find somebody who does this. Like if you could cut curly hair, the number of times I've seen people post, they are looking for a hairstylist that knows how to cut curly hair. If you've got those skills, you could be making some money. Like I said, with Corinne, doing skincare, cooking, there's a whole host of things that if you think about, you could approach this a couple of ways. You could approach it like, what is something I can provide the local population that doesn't exist there already? Or you could focus on your clientele being other foreigners. What are things that other foreigners would like to have that they don't have access to in this location? So um, we answered that question. Talked about that. Okay. So I think we answered the questions that y'all had here. Before I let you go, just a reminder that Exodus Summit is next month, and next month is like next month is next week. Is next month, is October next week? Oh my gosh. Okay. Exodus Summit is going to have people who break down different ways that you can make money. Now, one thing that was not on my list, because I don't know anything about this, is for the folks that when you envision your version of moving abroad, you don't mind going back to the United States periodically. They're going to have a session on like how to work part-time but earn full-time money. A friend of mine who has a beach house in Honduras is going to do this because they're a nurse. And so they will come, they work in the ER. So they're going to come do their ER nurse thing for, 5 days out of the month or whatever, and then the rest of the month they're in Honduras. That's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is you come, you work a contract for 6 months, and then you're out for 6 months. They're going to have a session on that. They're going to have a session. Now, my session is on what do you call it? Um, my session is on passive income because I don't want to work, right? I told y'all. But if you are in the mood or you are more inclined to do more active stock investing, like trading, they have a session where somebody is going to talk to you about how to trade to make money. That is not my wheelhouse. That is not my ministry, but there is going to be a session on that. If you're considering freelancing, there is a session. It's going to be done by a freelance writer, but honestly, I think it applies to all freelancers because it's the same sort of thing, like setting yourself up, making pitches, getting clients, that kind of thing. There's also going to be somebody who is a VA, a virtual assistant. So that's you as a business that's completely mobile. You could take that anywhere for something like that. You could use that to qualify for like the DAFT visa, but you could also use virtual assistant work to qualify for a digital nomad visa. So there's going to be a bunch of different ways to make money. I was excited to hear that over the weekend, Stephanie and Rashida announced that there's going to be a session on how to set up your OnlyFans. Uh, I'm curious about that, but I want to know if it's like lazy girl friendly because I'm not trying to do no work. But if it could be lazy girl friendly, that could be a lot of money. So if you don't have tickets, you absolutely will want to get them. I know they I think they will go up on October 9th. I don't know I know they will go up on October 9th. They may go up before then. So get your ticket. I will be there. Lots of people in this chat will be there. The other thing that I want to remind y'all of is that I will be doing in November, because I saw somebody had a question about like beginning investing. I will be hosting the Get Started Investing Challenge. It is 6 days, and we do exactly what the name says. We get you started investing. It is specifically set up for newbies or scaredies. So, and by that I mean you've got, when you got your job, they signed you up for the 401k or the 403b, but you don't really know what's going on with it. And you're kind of scared to do anything or mess it up. You might want to join the challenge. That will be the first full week in November. And what is today? Today is the 23rd. The people on the mailing list. So you can either get on the mailing list or you can sign up on the wait list on at getstartedinvestingchallenge.com. Either one is fine. But those people will get first dibs on spaces for the challenge. So wanted to make sure I should have mentioned that in my announcements at the beginning, but I forgot. It wasn't on my paper. Okay. Yes, it needs to be lazy girl friendly. Uh, Somebody recently asked me about like what are my future goals? What are the things that I aspire to do? And there are none. I have done them. I am doing them now. I am in chill mode. I am in lazy girl mode. If whatever the thing is I end up doing ain't lazy girl friendly, it ain't for me. Not at all. Not at all. All right, y'all. Thank you for coming to hang out with me. If you are watching this in the future on the replay, thank you for watching. I appreciate you all. If you are not subscribed to the channel, it would be awesome if you would subscribe, because that way I know YouTube will show you my stuff. All right, y'all. I will talk to you later. I will talk to you later. I just remembered something, but I'm going to save that for later. All right, y'all.